The crystal chandelier above Caroline Kingston's head shattered the moment her Laubautin heel caught the edge of a wet floor sign, sending her body careening backward with enough force to knock the breath from her lungs. But instead of hitting the cold supermarket tile, she landed against something warm and solid that smelled faintly of cedar and laundry detergent. "Whoa, I've got you," a deep voice said near her ear as strong arms steadied her weight effortlessly. Caroline's heart hammered as she regained her footing, turning to face her rescuer with flushed cheeks and disheveled blonde hair falling from its usually perfect updo. The man who had caught her stood about 6'2" with sandy brown hair, kind hazel eyes, and the kind of rugged handsomeness that came from actual hard work rather than expensive personal trainers. He wore a faded flannel shirt and jeans that had seen better days, and his work boots were scuffed beyond repair. "Thank you," Caroline managed, smoothing down her cream cashmere sweater that probably cost more than this man's entire outfit. "I didn't see the sign." "No problem. Are you okay?" His concern seemed genuine as he made sure she was stable before letting go completely. A small boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, appeared beside him clutching a box of cereal. "Dad, did you catch that lady?" the boy asked with wide eyes. "Sure did, buddy." "Always gotta help people when they need it, remember?" The man ruffled the boy's dark hair affectionately. Caroline found herself staring at the interaction, something warm and unfamiliar stirring in her chest. "Well, thank you again," Caroline said, suddenly feeling awkward in a way she never did during billion-dollar negotiations. "You saved me from a very embarrassing fall." "Glad I was in the right place at the right time," he smiled, and Caroline noticed how it crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Come on, Max, we still need to grab milk and bread." Caroline watched them walk away, the man's hand resting protectively on his son's shoulder as they navigated toward the dairy section. She stood there for a moment longer than necessary, her carefully curated shopping list forgotten as something peculiar happened in her usually logical, business-focused mind. She wondered about them, about their story, about why a simple act of kindness had left her feeling so off balance. Shaking her head, Caroline grabbed her cart and tried to refocus on why she had come to this ordinary grocery store in the first place. Her assistant had suggested she experience how regular people shopped, to better understand the market demographic for her company's new retail division. Caroline Kingston, CEO of Kingston Enterprises, worth approximately $3.7 billion, had thought the idea ridiculous, but went along with it anyway. Now she was grateful for the suggestion, though not for business reasons. She found herself unconsciously following the same path through the store, catching glimpses of the man and his son as they carefully compared prices, selected generic brands, and counted change from his wallet. The observation struck her as both humbling and heartbreaking. Her own cart filled with organic produce and premium products that she grabbed without checking price tags. "Dad, can we get the cookies? Please?" She heard Max's voice from the next aisle. "Not this week, buddy. Maybe next paycheck, okay?" "We have to make sure we have enough for your field trip money." "It's okay, Dad. I don't need them," Max said with a maturity that seemed beyond his years. Caroline's throat tightened. She turned the corner, pretending to examine pasta sauce labels, but really watching the father crouch down to his son's eye level. "Hey, I'm sorry things are tight right now. I promise it won't always be this way. I'm working on it, okay?" His voice was gentle but carried an undertone of exhaustion. "I know, Dad. You're the best dad ever, even without cookies." Max hugged him, and Caroline had to look away, feeling like she was intruding on an intimate moment. When she reached the checkout line, fate intervened again. They were 2 lanes over, unloading their modest groceries. The cashier scanned their items while the father watched the total climb on the screen with barely concealed anxiety. When the final amount appeared, Caroline saw him carefully count out bills and change, coming up just short. "I'm sorry, can you take off the juice boxes?" he asked quietly. Dad, no, those are for my lunch, Max protested. I'll pack you water, it's healthier anyway. Caroline didn't think. She simply acted. Excuse me, she called out, walking over to their lane with her wallet already open. I'll cover the difference. The man's face flushed red. That's not necessary. We're fine. Please, I insist, call it a thank you for saving me from a concussion earlier. Caroline handed the cashier a $100 bill before he could protest further. Madam, this is way too much, the cashier said. Keep it for their groceries and put the rest toward whoever comes through your line and needs help. Caroline smiled at the stunned expression on everyone's faces. The man's jaw clenched. I don't need charity. It's not charity, it's kindness. The same kindness you showed me when you caught me. Caroline met his eyes steadily. Please, let me do this. Something passed between them in that moment, a connection Caroline couldn't name but felt deep in her bones. The man's shoulders relaxed slightly, and he nodded, though pride clearly warred with necessity in his expression. Thank you, he said finally. That's very generous. You're welcome. Caroline extended her hand. I'm Caroline. He shook it, his hand rough with calluses. Grant Cooper. This is my son, Max. Nice to meet you both properly. Caroline smiled at Max, who grinned back with a gap-toothed smile. You're really pretty, Max said innocently, making Grant's face flush darker. Max, come on, Grant said, but Caroline laughed. Thank you, Max. You're quite handsome yourself. They parted ways in the parking lot, but Caroline couldn't stop thinking about Grant Cooper and his son as she drove back to her penthouse apartment. That night, lying in her king-sized bed with silk sheets and a view of the city skyline, she found herself wondering where they lived, what Grant did for work, and whether Max's mother was in the picture. Over the next week, Caroline did something completely out of character. She returned to that same grocery store 5 times, hoping for another chance encounter. Her assistant thought she had lost her mind. Her board members would have been horrified at this waste of the CEO's valuable time, but Caroline didn't care. Something about Grant Cooper had awakened a part of her she didn't know existed, a yearning for something real and meaningful beyond profit margins and stock prices. On her 6th visit, she finally saw them again. Grant was in the produce section, teaching Max how to select the best apples. You want ones that are firm, see? No soft spots, Grant was saying. Mr. Cooper, Caroline said, approaching with her cart. Her heart was racing in a way that boardroom presentations never made it race. Grant looked up, surprise crossing his features. Caroline, hi. Please call me Caroline. Mr. Cooper makes me feel like we're in a business meeting. She smiled warmly. Then you should call me Grant. Do you shop here often? I've never seen you before that day. Caroline felt heat rise to her cheeks. Actually, I've been coming here more often. The produce is good. The lie felt transparent, but Grant didn't call her on it. Miss Caroline, Max bounded over. Dad, it's the nice lady from before. I see that, buddy. Grant's expression had softened. Are you shopping again? Do you have kids? Do you like apples? We're making pie tonight. Max's questions tumbled out rapid fire. Max, let the lady breathe, Grant said with an embarrassed laugh. It's fine, Caroline assured him. No, I don't have kids. Yes, I like apples. And pie sounds wonderful. You should come over, Max said excitedly. Max, you can't just invite people to our house, Grant said, but there was no real reprimand in his tone. Why not? You said we should be kind to people, and she was kind to us. Caroline saw the internal struggle on Grant's face, pride versus his son's innocent enthusiasm. She decided to take a risk. I would actually love that if it's not too much trouble. I haven't had homemade apple pie in years. We live in a small apartment, Grant said carefully. It's not fancy. I don't care about fancy, Caroline said, and she meant it. I care about good company. Something shifted in Grant's expression, a cautious hope replacing the wariness. Okay then, how about tonight? 6 o'clock? Caroline's smile could have lit up the entire store. I'll be there. Grant wrote his address on the back of her receipt, and Caroline noticed how his handwriting was neat, despite the worn pen he used. She memorized the address like it was the most important information she had ever received. That evening, Caroline stood in her closet staring at racks of designer clothes, unsure what to wear to a modest apartment for homemade pie. Everything she owned screamed wealth and privilege. Finally, she settled on simple jeans, a soft blue sweater, and minimal jewelry. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her hair was down, her makeup subtle, her expression nervous but excited. She stopped at a small bakery on the way and picked up fresh bread and some cookies for Max, then questioned whether that was appropriate or would seem condescending. By the time she reached the address Grant had given her, she was second-guessing everything. The apartment building was old but well-maintained. Caroline climbed 3 flights of stairs, finding apartment 312 at the end of the hall. She could hear laughter inside, and she stood there for a moment just listening, her hand raised to knock. When she finally did, Max's excited voice called out, "I'll get it." The door swung open to reveal Max in an apron that was clearly too big for him. "You came." "Of course I came. I wouldn't miss it." Caroline handed him the bag of cookies. "These are for you." "Dad," she brought cookies. Max ran back inside, and Grant appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands on a towel. He wore a plain t-shirt and jeans, his hair slightly messy and flour dusting one cheek. Caroline thought he looked wonderful. "Hey, come in," Grant said, stepping aside. "Sorry about the mess." The apartment was small but immaculately clean. The furniture was old and mismatched, but everything had a place. Photos of Max at various ages covered one wall, and children's artwork was displayed proudly on the refrigerator. It felt more like a home than Caroline's expensive penthouse ever had. "Your place is lovely," Caroline said honestly. "You don't have to be polite," Grant said with a wry smile. "I know it's not much. I mean it. It feels like a real home." Caroline looked around, taking in the details. A bookshelf full of worn paperbacks. A puzzle half completed on the coffee table. A baseball glove on the couch. "You can tell people actually live here and love each other." Grant's expression softened. "Well, that part's true. Can I get you something to drink? I have water, milk, or juice boxes." "Water would be great." Caroline sat at the small kitchen table while Grant poured glasses. Max was already showing her his school drawings, chattering about his friends and his favorite subjects. "Max is in 2nd grade," Grant said, returning with the water. "He's doing really well, making honor roll." "That's wonderful, Max. You must work very hard," Caroline said. "Dad helps me with homework every night," Max said proudly, "even when he's tired from work." "What do you do?" Caroline asked Grant, genuinely curious. "I'm a carpenter, mostly renovation work, whatever I can get." Grant started rolling out pie dough, his movements practiced and sure. "My dad taught me the trade. I had my own small business for a while, but things got complicated when my wife left." The revelation hung in the air. Caroline processed it carefully. "Max's mother?" "Yeah." She took off when Max was 3, said she wasn't cut out for motherhood or small-town life. Guess she found what she was looking for somewhere else. Grant's voice was matter-of-fact, but Caroline heard the old hurt underneath. "It's been just us ever since." "I'm sorry that happened. Don't be." "Max and I are doing fine. Aren't we, buddy?" "The best," Max agreed, helping his dad arrange apple slices in the pie crust. Caroline watched them work together with such easy affection and teamwork. Grant guided Max's hands, showed him how to sprinkle cinnamon just right, let him taste test with exaggerated seriousness. This, Caroline realized, was what she had been missing her entire life. Not the cooking or the modest apartment, but the genuine love and connection between two people. "Can I help?" Caroline asked. Grant looked surprised. "You want to help make pie? I don't know how, but I'd like to learn." Something warm flickered in Grant's eyes. "Come here, then." For the next hour, Caroline Kingston, Billionaire CEO, learned how to make apple pie from scratch under Grant Cooper's patient instruction. Their hands bumped as they worked. He stood close behind her, guiding her knife through apples, his breath warm on her neck. Max provided running commentary and stole apple slices when he thought no one was watching. When the pie finally went into the oven, they settled on the couch to wait. Max wedged himself between them, showing Caroline his favorite book and asking her to read it. Grant started to protest that she was a guest, but Caroline was already opening the worn pages, her voice gentle as she read about dragons and knights. Grant watched her with an expression that made Caroline's heart skip. When Max's head drooped against her shoulder halfway through the story, Grant smiled apologetically. He wore himself out with excitement about tonight. "He's wonderful," Caroline said softly, continuing to read even though Max had fallen asleep. When she finished the book, Grant carefully lifted his son and carried him to the bedroom. Caroline could hear the quiet sounds of tucking in and whispered goodnights. When Grant returned, the apartment felt suddenly more intimate with just the two of them. He sat beside Caroline, leaving a respectful distance, but she could feel the awareness between them crackling like electricity. "You're good with him," Grant said. "He's easy to be good with. You've done an amazing job raising him. Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water." Grant's honesty was refreshing. "The carpentry work is inconsistent. Some weeks are good, some weeks I'm scrambling. I'm trying to save up to start my business again, but it's slow going. Max deserves better." "Max deserves you," Caroline said firmly. "He deserves a father who loves him, teaches him, shows up for him every single day. That's worth more than money." Grant looked at her intently. "You really believe that?" "I do. My parents had all the money in the world, but they shipped me off to boarding school at 8 years old. I saw them maybe twice a year. They taught me about balance sheets and profit margins, but never about love or family." Caroline was surprised at her own openness. She never talked about this. "What you have with Max is priceless." The timer for the pie went off, breaking the moment. Grant retrieved it from the oven, the smell filling the apartment with warmth and sweetness. They ate slices at the small table, their knees touching underneath, conversation flowing easily about everything and nothing. Caroline learned that Grant was 32, just 3 years older than her. He loved old movies and baseball. He read voraciously, despite working long hours. He dreamed of building custom furniture, creating beautiful things with his hands. In turn, Caroline found herself sharing more than she expected. Her loneliness, despite being surrounded by people. The pressure of running a billion-dollar empire inherited from her father. The way she sometimes felt like a fraud, playing a part rather than living authentically. "Why do you keep doing it if it makes you unhappy?" Grant asked. "I don't know if I'm unhappy exactly. I'm just not happy." Caroline laughed at the distinction. "It's all I've ever known, and it feels irresponsible to walk away from that much responsibility. But you're a person, not just a CEO. You deserve to be happy." His words hit Caroline with unexpected force. When had she stopped thinking about her own happiness? When had duty completely overshadowed desire? It was nearly midnight when Caroline finally left, promising Max through his sleepy protests that she would visit again. Grant walked her down to her car, and his eyes widened when he saw the Mercedes. "I'm guessing you do okay for yourself," he said with a low whistle. Caroline had hoped to avoid this conversation a bit longer. "I do all right." "What do you do?" "I run a company, Kingston Enterprises." She watched his face carefully. Grant's eyebrows rose. "The Kingston Enterprises, the tech and retail conglomerate. That's the one." "So when you said you don't care about fancy, you meant that literally, because you already have all the fancy anyone could want." "Grant, I know this seems strange. Rich woman randomly befriending a struggling single dad and his son. I promise I'm not doing this out of pity or some weird charity impulse. I genuinely like spending time with you and Max." Grant studied her face in the streetlight. "What are you looking for here, Caroline?" "Honestly, I don't know. I just know that meeting you felt important. Being with you and Max tonight was the happiest I've been in longer than I can remember." Caroline took a risk and stepped closer. "I'd like to see you again, both of you." if you're open to it. This is crazy, Grant said, but he was smiling, probably. We're from completely different worlds. Does that matter? It might, eventually. But Grant was still smiling, and when Caroline reached for his hand, he didn't pull away. His calloused palm pressed against hers, warm and solid and real. Let's find out, Caroline said. Okay, Grant agreed, but I have conditions. If we're going to do this, whatever this is, you meet me where I am. I can't keep up with your lifestyle. I won't pretend to be someone I'm not. And Max comes first, always. I wouldn't want it any other way. Grant squeezed her hand. Then yeah, I'd like to see you again too. Caroline drove home that night with Grant's number saved in her phone and pie filling still under her fingernails. Her penthouse felt cold and empty after the warmth of that small apartment. She lay in bed replaying every moment, every smile, every accidental touch. Over the following weeks, Caroline's life transformed in ways both subtle and profound. She started leaving work earlier, declining evening events she would have once considered mandatory. She spent her free time at Grant's apartment or the park with him and Max. They went to the zoo, where Max delighted in every exhibit and Grant's hand found Caroline's as they walked. They had picnics with sandwiches Grant made, sitting on a blanket watching Max play. Caroline learned the rhythms of their life. Max's bedtime routine, the way Grant made breakfast while helping with spelling homework, the careful budgeting that went into every decision. She saw Grant's pride and his frustration, his devotion to his son and his exhaustion from carrying everything alone. She also saw Grant himself, the way he laughed with his whole body, how he read Max to sleep every night with different voices for each character. The gentleness in his hands despite their roughness, the intelligence in his eyes, the thoughtfulness in his words. Grant Cooper was unlike anyone Caroline had ever known, and she was falling for him with an inevitability that both thrilled and terrified her. One Saturday afternoon, Grant had a job site that needed his attention. I hate to ask, he said, looking uncomfortable, but my usual babysitter is sick. I don't suppose you'd want to watch Max for a few hours. I'd love to, Caroline said immediately. Are you sure? He can be a handful. We'll be fine. Won't we, Max? Yeah, Dad, we'll have fun, Max said, already pulling out board games. Grant gave them both careful instructions, kissed Max's forehead, and looked at Caroline with such trust and gratitude that she felt her chest tighten. Thank you. I'll be back by 4. After he left, Caroline and Max played games, made lunch, and eventually ended up talking about everything from dinosaurs to space to why the sky was blue. Caroline found herself genuinely enjoying the conversation, matching Max's enthusiasm, asking questions and learning alongside him. Miss Caroline, Max said as they colored together, are you my dad's girlfriend? Caroline's crayon slipped. Would that be okay with you if I was? Max considered this seriously. I think so. You make Dad smile a lot. He doesn't smile as much usually. He works too hard. Your dad is a very special man. He's the best. My friend Tyler's dad never comes to school stuff, but my dad always does, even when he's really tired. Max switched to a blue crayon. Do you want to marry my dad? Max, I think that's a conversation your dad and I would need to have first. But do you like him? Like him? Caroline couldn't help but laugh at the very second-grade phrasing. Yes, I like him. Good, he likes you too, I can tell. When Grant returned, he found them sprawled on the living room floor surrounded by crayons and paper, in the middle of creating an elaborate fantasy world. Caroline was drawing dragons while Max narrated their adventures. Grant stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching, and the look on his face made Caroline's breath catch. Looks like you two had fun, he said. The best, Max confirmed. Miss Caroline is really good at drawing dragons. Is she now? Grant caught Caroline's eye, smiling in a way that made her feel warm all over. That night, after Max was asleep, Grant and Caroline sat on the small balcony off the apartment. It was barely big enough for 2 lawn chairs, overlooking a parking lot, but Caroline wouldn't have traded it for all the luxury views in the world. "Thank you again for today," Grant said. "It meant a lot." "It was my pleasure. Max is incredible." "He asked you if we were dating, didn't he?" "I saw his serious face when I got home." Caroline laughed. "He wanted to know if I was your girlfriend. And what did you say?" "I said that was something you and I needed to talk about." Caroline turned to face him. "So, Grant Cooper, what are we doing here?" Grant reached over and took her hand. "I've been wondering the same thing. This has been the best month of my life, having you around. But Caroline, I need you to be realistic about what you'd be getting into. I'm broke most of the time. I drive a truck that's held together with duct tape and prayer. I live in a 3-room apartment and shop at discount stores. I have a 7-year-old son who will always be my top priority. I can't take you to fancy restaurants or buy you expensive gifts." "Grant, stop," Caroline interrupted. "I don't want fancy restaurants or expensive gifts. I have all of that and it's empty. What you're offering is so much more valuable. You're offering something real." "But for how long?" Grant's voice was gentle but serious. "What happens when the novelty wears off, when reality sets in? I can't have Max getting attached to you if you're going to realize this was all some kind of experiment and walk away." Caroline moved from her chair to his, settling on his lap despite the tight space. She cupped his face in her hands, looking directly into his eyes. "I'm not going anywhere. I know this is fast and unconventional. I know we're from different worlds. But Grant, I'm falling in love with you and Max and this life you've built. For the first time in my entire existence, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Grant's hands came up to her waist, holding her carefully. "You're falling in love with me, completely. Caroline, I started falling for you the moment I caught you in that grocery store, but I kept telling myself it was impossible, that someone like you couldn't really want someone like me." "Well, I do. I really, really do." Grant kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Caroline melted into him, her hands sliding into his hair, his arms tightening around her. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "So we're doing this?" Grant asked. "We're doing this. It's not going to be easy." "I don't care. My life is complicated. So is mine." Grant laughed, pulling her close again. "You're stubborn. I'm a CEO. It's kind of required." They stayed on that tiny balcony until the early hours of the morning, talking and kissing and planning, building a foundation for whatever came next. The next few months tested them in ways Caroline hadn't anticipated. The media found out about their relationship, and suddenly Caroline's private life became public fodder. Headlines screamed about the billionaire CEO and her charity case boyfriend. Grant's face appeared in tabloids with cruel commentary about gold digging and ulterior motives. Photographers followed them to the park with Max, making the child scared and confused. The board of Kingston Enterprises expressed concerns. Caroline's mother, who she rarely spoke to, suddenly called with opinions about appropriate partners for someone of Caroline's status. Business associates made pointed comments. The pressure mounted from every direction. Grant handled it with more grace than Caroline did. "Let them talk," he said when she apologized for the 20th time. "I know who I am. You know who I am. That's what matters." But Caroline could see it wearing on him. The cameras when he picked Max up from school, the whispers from other parents. The way waiters looked at him differently when he was with Caroline versus when he was alone. His pride took hit after hit, and Caroline felt helpless to protect him. Things came to a head at a Kingston Enterprises charity gala that Caroline couldn't avoid. She wanted Grant there with her, wanted him by her side, but worried about exposing him to more scrutiny. "I'll be fine," Grant assured her. "I clean up okay." The night of the gala, Grant arrived at her penthouse in a rented tuxedo that fit imperfectly, but made him look devastatingly handsome. Caroline wore a deep blue gown that cost more than Grant's monthly rent, and the disparity wasn't lost on either of them. "You look beautiful," Grant said, taking her hands. "You look amazing," Caroline replied. "Are you sure you want to do this?" "I'm sure. If this is part of your life, I want to be there for it." The gala was everything Caroline usually found tedious. Fake conversations, political maneuvering, people seeing dollar signs instead of human beings. But having Grant beside her transformed the experience. He was charming without being obsequious, intelligent without being pretentious, and utterly unimpressed by wealth and status in a way that actually seemed to impress people. Then Marcus Kellerman, a board member who had never liked Caroline, approached with a drink in hand and malice in his eyes. "So this is the famous carpenter. Tell me, Mr. Cooper, what's it like dating someone who could buy and sell you 1,000 times over?" Grant's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. "It's like dating someone I care about deeply. Her bank account doesn't enter into it." "How convenient for you." "Marcus, that's enough," Caroline said sharply. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. It's an odd match, Caroline. Surely you can see how this looks." "It looks like I'm happy," Caroline said, her voice cold enough to frost glass. "Which is more than I can say for the years I spent trying to please people like you." Grant's hand found the small of her back, steadying and supportive. "We should go," he murmured. They left early, Caroline's heels clicking on marble as they walked out. In the car, she finally let her composure crack. "I'm so sorry. He had no right to say those things." "He's not entirely wrong, though," Grant said quietly. "It is an odd match. People are going to talk." "I don't care what people think, but I do. Not for me, but for you and Max." "I don't want to be the reason your career suffers or Max gets teased at school." Caroline pulled the car over, turning to face him fully. "Grant, listen to me. I have spent my entire life doing what other people expected. Being the daughter my parents wanted, the CEO the board approved of, the perfect public figure for the media. And I was miserable. Meeting you changed everything. You showed me what actually matters. Love. Family. Being with someone who sees me as a person, not a portfolio. I'm not giving that up." "I'm not giving you up." Grant's eyes were bright in the streetlight. "You really mean that? With everything I have." He kissed her then, deep and urgent, one hand tangled in her carefully styled hair, the other pulling her as close as the car's center console would allow. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you," Grant said. "I've been trying not to say it, trying to keep some perspective, but I can't anymore. I'm in love with you, Caroline Kingston." Joy burst through Caroline's chest like fireworks. "I love you too, so much." They made it back to her penthouse, and barely through the door before they were kissing again, months of tension and restraint finally breaking. Grant's hands mapped the zipper of her gown while Caroline worked the buttons of his rented shirt. They made love for the first time with a desperation born of finally surrendering to what they'd both been fighting, and afterwards, tangled in expensive sheets, Grant pulled Caroline close. "Stay with me tonight," she whispered. "Don't go back to the apartment." "I can't. Max is at my neighbor's." "I promised I'd be back by midnight." "Then I'll come with you." They dressed in comfortable clothes and drove back to Grant's apartment, picking up a sleepy Max who grumbled adorably about being woken up. Back in the small apartment, Grant tucked Max into bed while Caroline waited, and when he emerged, they curled up together on the couch. "I could get used to this," Grant murmured against her hair. "Good, because I'm planning on being around for a very long time." The next morning, Caroline woke in Grant's bed to the smell of pancakes and the sound of Max's laughter. She found them in the kitchen, Grant flipping pancakes while Max set the table with exaggerated care. "Morning, sleepyhead," Grant said, kissing her temple as she entered. "Miss Caroline." "Dad's making his special pancakes," Max announced. They ate breakfast together like a family, and Caroline felt a rightness settle over her that she'd never experienced. This was what she wanted. This messy, chaotic, perfect normalcy. Over the following months, Caroline began making changes in her life. She delegated more at work, trusting her executive team to handle day-to-day operations while she focused on strategic vision. She moved out of her penthouse and into a comfortable house in Grant's neighborhood, nothing fancy but with a yard where Max could play. She simplified her wardrobe, her schedule, her priorities, Her mother was horrified. The board was concerned. But Caroline's happiness was undeniable, and slowly, people began to accept the relationship. Particularly when they saw how well Caroline was actually performing at work, freed from the constant stress and isolation she'd lived with before. Grant's business picked up too, partly because of Caroline's connections, but mostly because word spread about his craftsmanship. He started getting commissions for custom furniture, pieces that showcased his artistry. Caroline helped him set up a proper business structure, not by throwing money at it, but by using her knowledge to help him plan and grow sustainably. "I don't want you to bankroll this," Grant insisted. "I need to build it myself." "I'm not bankrolling anything. I'm advising like any business consultant would. You're doing the actual work." Grant kissed her. "You're amazing, you know that? I learned from the best. You taught me what really matters." One Saturday, nearly a year after that fateful grocery store meeting, Grant took Caroline and Max to the beach. Max ran ahead, chasing waves and collecting shells, while Grant and Caroline walked hand in hand along the shore. "This has been the best year of my life," Grant said suddenly. "You changed everything. We changed everything. Together." Grant stopped walking, turning to face her. The ocean breeze caught Caroline's hair, and the late afternoon sun painted everything golden. Max was far enough ahead to give them privacy, but close enough that Grant could keep watch. "I wanted to wait until I had more to offer you," Grant said, reaching into his pocket. "Until I could afford some big romantic gesture or an expensive ring. But Caroline, I've realized that's not what we're about. We're about real life and real love and building something authentic together." Caroline's heart began hammering as Grant pulled out a small box. Inside was a simple silver band with a modest diamond. "It's not much compared to what you're used to." "It's perfect," Caroline whispered, tears already streaming down her face. "Caroline Kingston, you caught me just as much as I caught you that day. You made me believe in love again, in partnership, in the possibility of building a future. Will you marry me? Will you be Max's stepmom and my wife and my partner in this crazy life?" "Yes," Caroline said through happy tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." Grant slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly. He kissed her as the waves crashed around them and Max's excited shout of "Dad, Miss Caroline, look at this shell," made them both laugh against each other's lips. They told Max together, sitting on the beach with him between them. "Buddy, I asked Caroline to marry me and she said yes. How do you feel about that?" Max's face went through several emotions before landing on pure joy. "So she'll be my stepmom? Like officially?" "If that's okay with you," Caroline said softly. "Are you kidding? That's the best thing ever." Max threw his arms around both of them. "Wait until I tell Tyler. My dad is marrying the coolest person in the world." They stayed on the beach until sunset, Max building sandcastles while Grant and Caroline planned their future. Nothing extravagant, they decided. A small wedding with people who mattered, a life built on love rather than luxury. Caroline called her assistant that night to clear her schedule for the following week. She called her board and informed them she'd be taking her first real vacation in 5 years. She called her mother and, for the first time in her life, stood firm when faced with criticism. "I'm marrying him, Mother. I love him and Max, and I'm going to build a life with them. You can be part of that or not, but I'm done seeking your approval." Her mother's silence was long, but when she finally spoke, her voice was softer than Caroline had ever heard it. "Your father would have fought you on this. I know. But I'm not your father, and I've watched you this past year. You're happy, Caroline, truly happy. I haven't seen that since you were a little girl before we sent you away to school." Her mother paused. "I made mistakes with you. Perhaps I can do better as a grandmother." Caroline's eyes filled with tears. Max would love that. The wedding took place 4 months later in a small garden venue with fewer than 50 guests. Max served as ring bearer and best man, taking both roles very seriously. Caroline wore a simple ivory dress that she chose herself, not a designer gown, but something pretty and comfortable. Grant wore a suit he'd bought specifically for the occasion, not rented but his own, purchased with money from his growing business. Caroline's mother attended, meeting Max for the first time and surprising everyone by being genuinely warm. Several board members came, having grown to respect Grant over the months of seeing him at company events. Grant's crew from various job sites attended, along with Max's teacher and several of his school friends' families. But the moment that mattered most was when Caroline and Grant stood facing each other, speaking vows they'd written themselves. "Grant, you caught me when I was falling, literally and figuratively. You showed me that success isn't measured in dollars but in love. You gave me a family when I didn't even know I needed one. I promise to be your partner, your supporter, your love for all my days. I promise to be the mother Max deserves, to honor the family you've built, and to help create our future together." Grant's voice was thick with emotion as he replied, "Caroline, you caught me just as much as I caught you. You brought light into a life I thought would always be a struggle. You love my son like he's your own. You see me, the real me, and love me anyway. I promise to be worthy of that love every single day. I promise to support your dreams as you support mine. I promise to build a life with you based on respect, honesty, and more love than I even knew was possible." When they kissed as husband and wife, Max cheered louder than anyone, and Caroline laughed against Grant's lips, happier than she'd ever been. The reception was held at Grant and Caroline's home, the house she'd bought in his neighborhood that was now truly theirs. They decorated the backyard with string lights and simple flowers. The food was catered, but not by some pretentious company by the local restaurant where they'd eaten countless casual dinners. There was dancing and cake and toasts that made everyone laugh and cry. Max gave a speech that he'd written himself with Grant's help. "I used to think it was just me and Dad against the world, and that was good. But now we have Caroline, and our family is even better. She makes the best pancakes after Dad, and she reads bedtime stories with really good voices, and she never gets mad when I ask a million questions. I'm really glad she tripped at the grocery store that day, because that's how we got the best family ever." There wasn't a dry eye in the house. Caroline and Grant didn't take an elaborate honeymoon. Instead, they took Max to Disney World for a week, a trip they'd planned together as a family. Max's wonder and excitement made it more magical than any exotic destination could have been. They rode every ride Max was tall enough for, watched fireworks while eating ice cream, and stayed up too late every night just enjoying being together. When they returned home, real life settled in with a comfort that felt earned. Caroline continued running Kingston Enterprises, but with better balance. She worked from home 2 days a week, attended Max's school events, and never missed family dinner. Grant's furniture business flourished, and he eventually opened a small workshop. He hired a few employees, teaching them the craft with the same patience he showed Max. Max thrived with 2 parents who adored him. His grades improved, his confidence grew, and he blossomed into a kind, thoughtful child who'd learned from both of them the importance of hard work, compassion, and staying true to yourself. 2 years after their wedding, Caroline discovered she was pregnant. The news was unexpected but joyous. Max was thrilled at the prospect of being a big brother. Grant cried when Caroline told him, holding her close and whispering about second chances and dreams he'd stopped letting himself have. They prepared together, the whole family involved. Max helped paint the nursery, choosing colors and helping arrange furniture that Grant had built himself. Caroline dealt with morning sickness while running board meetings, and her executive team stepped up in ways that showed how good her leadership had become. Grant was protective and attentive, making sure Caroline rested, attending every doctor's appointment, reading pregnancy books late into the night. He'd already been through this once, but doing it with someone he loved who loved him back made everything different and new. When Emma Rose Cooper arrived on a spring morning, she came into the world surrounded by love. Max held his little sister with careful reverence, Grant cried again, and Caroline felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. The first few months were exhausting. Sleepless nights and constant feedings, and the chaos of adjusting to a newborn while caring for an active 9-year-old and maintaining their careers. But they did it together, supporting each other through the hard moments and celebrating the beautiful ones. Caroline's mother became an unexpectedly involved grandmother, visiting weekly and showering Max and Emma with the affection she'd never shown Caroline. It didn't erase the past, but it offered hope for healing. Kingston Enterprises continued to thrive under Caroline's leadership. But now, it was just one part of her life rather than her entire identity. She implemented family-friendly policies throughout the company, increased wages for lower-level employees, and started a charitable foundation focused on supporting single parents and families in need. Her board initially resisted, but the positive press and employee satisfaction ratings eventually won them over. Grant's business grew steadily. He was particular about the work he took, choosing quality over quantity, artistry over profit. His pieces appeared in upscale homes and boutique hotels, each one bearing his mark of craftsmanship. He hired single parents when he could, offering flexible schedules and fair wages, paying forward the kindness he and Max had received. They bought a bigger house eventually, one with space for Grant's growing workshop, an office for Caroline, and a big backyard where Max and Emma could play. It wasn't a mansion, despite Caroline's wealth. It was a home filled with laughter and love and the beautiful ordinary chaos of family life. On their 5th anniversary, Grant and Caroline returned to the grocery store where they'd met. They brought Max and Emma, making it a family outing. It had become a tradition, shopping there once a month despite having other options, remembering where their story began. "Do you ever regret it?" Grant asked as they navigated the produce section, Emma in the cart and Max helping select apples the way Grant had taught him years ago. "Giving up the fancy life for this." Caroline looked at her family. Her husband in worn jeans and a flannel shirt, still the handsomest man she'd ever seen. Her stepson, now almost 12, who called her mom without hesitation. Her daughter, 2 years old with Grant's eyes and her own determination. The cart full of groceries that they could easily afford now but still selected thoughtfully, teaching their children the value of mindfulness over excess. "Not for a single second," Caroline said. "I didn't give up anything, I gained everything." Grant kissed her right there in the produce section, Emma giggling and Max groaning in the way only preteens could. An older woman passing by smiled at them. "Beautiful family," she said. "Thank you," they responded together, and it was true. Years later, when people asked Caroline about her success, she didn't talk about Kingston Enterprises or her billions or the deals she'd closed. She talked about a grocery store and a wet floor sign and a man who caught her when she fell. She talked about choosing love over status, family over fortune, authenticity over appearance. She talked about how sometimes the greatest success in life comes from being brave enough to fall and grateful enough to appreciate the person who catches you. Grant never forgot what it was like to struggle, and neither did Caroline now that she'd seen it up close. Together, they established programs to help families facing hardship. Scholarships for kids like Max who needed support. Business grants for craftspeople like Grant trying to build something meaningful. Housing assistance and job training and all the practical help that Caroline's wealth could provide when directed with purpose and love. Max grew into a remarkable young man, studying architecture in college, wanting to design beautiful spaces where families could build memories. He never forgot what his dad had taught him about hard work, or what Caroline had shown him about using privilege responsibly. Emma inherited her mother's business acumen and her father's artistic eye. Destined for great things but grounded in the values both her parents shared. She never knew a world without love and security, but she grew up hearing stories about when times were harder, learning gratitude and compassion from both her parents' experiences. On a lazy Sunday afternoon, Nearly a decade after that life-changing trip at the grocery store, Caroline and Grant sat on their back porch watching their children play. Grant's hand rested on Caroline's knee, her head on his shoulder, completely comfortable in their silence. "You know what I think about sometimes," Grant said softly. "What's that?" "What my life would have looked like if you'd fallen a second earlier or later, if someone else had been standing there, if you'd never come back to that store looking for me." Caroline turned to look at him. "You looked for me. 6 times I went back that week, hoping to see you again. I thought I was crazy." Caroline laughed, bright and genuine. "I came back 6 times too. I guess we were both a little crazy. Or maybe we both knew something important had happened. That we'd found something worth fighting for." "Best fall of my life," Caroline said, kissing him softly. "Best catch of mine," Grant replied. Their children called for them to come play, and they went, joining in the game and the laughter and the beautiful ordinary magic of the life they'd built together. A life that started with an accident and a moment of kindness, that flourished through love and commitment and the courage to choose happiness over expectations. Caroline Kingston, billionaire CEO, had everything anyone could want by the world's standards. But Grant Cooper, carpenter and single dad, had taught her that those things meant nothing compared to love. And Max Cooper, sweet 7-year-old with a gap-toothed smile, had shown her that family was built through presence and care, not blood or obligation. Together, they created something neither could have found alone. A partnership built on respect and love. A family forged through choice and dedication. A home filled with the kind of wealth that mattered, the wealth of connection and joy and shared purpose. And it all began because Caroline had forgotten to watch where she was walking, and Grant had been there to catch her fall. The best accident either of them had ever experienced, leading to the most intentional and beautiful life they could have imagined. Years turned into decades, and their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened, growing richer with every challenge they faced together, every joy they shared, every ordinary moment that made up their extraordinary life. On their 25th anniversary, surrounded by their children and the grandchildren who'd come along the way, Caroline and Grant renewed their vows in the backyard of that same house where they'd held their original wedding reception. Max, now a successful architect with a family of his own, stood beside his father. Emma, running one of Kingston Enterprises' charitable divisions, stood beside her mother. "Thank you," Caroline said in her vows, "for catching me that day and every day since. Thank you for showing me what love looks like. Thank you for this beautiful life." Grant, silver in his hair now but still strong and steady, pulled her close. "Thank you for falling. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for choosing us." They kissed to the cheers of everyone they loved, and Caroline thought about that scared, lonely woman who'd tripped in a grocery store a quarter-century ago. She barely recognized that version of herself now. That Caroline had been successful but empty, wealthy but poor in the ways that mattered. This Caroline, held in Grant's arms with their family surrounding them, was rich beyond measure. Not in money, though she still had plenty of that, but in love, in connection, in purpose, in joy. She was surrounded by people who loved her not for her bank account or her last name, but for who she truly was. And Grant, who'd once counted coins to buy groceries, who'd worried constantly about providing for his son, had built an empire of his own. Not of money, but of legacy. He'd raised an incredible son who was now raising incredible children. He'd built a business that employed dozens of families. He'd loved a woman who'd needed to be loved exactly as she was. Together, they'd proven that love doesn't care about balance sheets or zip codes or whether you shop at luxury boutiques or discount stores. Love cares about showing up, about commitment, about choosing each other every single day. Their story became something of a legend in their community and beyond. Not because of the Cinderella-esque elements, the billionaire falling for the poor carpenter, though people certainly fixated on that angle. But because their love was so genuine, so real, so clearly built on mutual respect and authentic affection that it gave other people hope. Hope that real love existed. Hope that choosing authenticity over appearance was worth it. Hope that falling, whether literally or metaphorically, might lead to being caught by exactly the right person. Caroline and Grant never tired of telling their story. They told their grandchildren about the wet floor sign and the strong arms that had caught Grandma before she hit the ground. They told young couples at Kingston Enterprises events that sometimes the best things in life come when you're not looking, when you're just being yourself and paying attention to the people around you. They told Max's kids that their grandfather was the best man they'd ever known, that he'd built a beautiful life from nothing but love and determination. They told Emma's kids that their grandmother had been brave enough to walk away from a life that looked perfect to find one that actually was. And late at night, when it was just the two of them in the home they'd built together, Grant still held Caroline close and marveled at the journey they'd taken. From strangers in a grocery store to partners in every sense of the word. From cautious hope to absolute certainty. From two separate people to one unified team. "I love you," Grant would whisper, the same words he'd said thousands of times, but still meaning them with his whole heart. "I love you too," Caroline would reply, still amazed after all these years that she'd found this, found him, found the life she didn't know she was looking for. Their love story didn't have a dramatic ending because the best love stories don't end. They continue, day after day, choice after choice, moment after moment. They evolve and deepen and grow into something even more beautiful than their beginning. Caroline and Grant's story was still being written in the laughter of grandchildren and the success of the businesses they'd built. It was being written in the charitable works that bore their name and the families they'd helped along the way. It was being written in the example they set for what love could look like when it was real and honest and brave. But if you asked either of them, they'd say the most important part of their story was the simplest. A man catching a falling woman in a grocery store, a moment of kindness that neither expected would change everything. A choice to see each other, really see each other, and take a chance on something that didn't make sense on paper but made perfect sense in their hearts. That was their story. That was their legacy. That was their love. And it all began with a trip, a fall, and a catch that changed two lives forever.